Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Dall'Asta and I'm Associate Professor at the University of Parma in Italy. I'm a proud member of the ISOG Next Generation Committee, and as part of our project, we're now interviewing leading experts in the field of obstetrics and gynecology ultrasound. I'm in the obstetric field and I've decided to interview one of the top experts, who is Professor Liona Poon. Liona has been a professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and she's also an ISOG trustee. And Liona, first of all, I would like to thank you for accepting my invitation for this interview.
Thank you, Andrea. It is such an honor to be selected for an NGen interview.
So let me kick off with my question, because actually I have lots of questions for you because I need to get inspirations as well from your work. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, what attracted you to a life of clinical research?
Well, to be honest, I don't think I chose a life of clinical research. I think it's the other way around. I think clinical research chose me. So how it happened was that I just wanted to gain ultrasound experience in between jobs during my obs and gynae training, as in the old days. It's important to get some additional experience before getting a training number in the UK system. So I decided to get a job at the Harris Birthright Unit under the supervision of Professor Nicolaides, and then the rest is history. I got exposed to clinical research and then realized that it was so amazing to get answers to some questions that we raise on a day-to-day basis through high quality research. So I stumbled upon this and became interested.
Yeah, so basically, if you had to think about how and when your research career actually started, it wasn't your intention, just clinical work merging with clinical research and vice versa.
Well, I started my research career back in 2005, and that was right after my second year as a senior health officer. So it was quite early in my obs and gynae training. As mentioned, I wanted to gain ultrasound experience, and I got exposed to research. And one day, Kipros asked me if I wanted to do research. And of course, when your boss asks you, you would say yes. And I said yes. And I remember I was first involved in his progesterone trial for the prevention of preterm birth. But soon after that, I was given the opportunity to work on the first trimester preeclampsia project.
Okay, so these were the very first projects you've been on in your career, and all your memories, all your research, maybe, I'm not telling what has been published, but maybe what can be published in the future. Are you thinking of a project which represents a main achievement, or on the other hand, which represents or has represented a big challenge in your research activity?
I think in relation to the greatest achievement, it must be the successful development of the effective first trimester model for the prediction of preterm preeclampsia, followed by proving the fact that aspirin is indeed effective in preventing preterm preeclampsia amongst high-risk women. When we saw the Asprey trial result, it was an unbelievable moment. As you can imagine, it's either we failed or we succeeded, and luckily we succeeded, and so that was an amazing moment. In terms of challenges, I would say I'm faced with challenges every day, and I think this is how I get inspired, stimulated, and pushed to do more research. And if there are no challenges, there is no research.
Given your last answer, well, I'm pleased to say that I have exactly your same view, so I'm very pleased for that. But coming back, and this is my question comes from here, because of course clinical work gives you challenges. Do you think that all clinicians should be interested in research?
That's a very good question, and I don't want to give people pressure. What I tell my clinical colleagues is that they are involved in research all the time. If they have raised a question with regard to our clinical practice, that is already part of research, because you need to have a good research question in order to conduct good clinical research. At my unit, I have integrated clinical research within our daily clinical work, from pregnancy screening to management of labor. So this is how I can entice my clinical colleagues to be involved. and I don't want to be a burden to them. But then over time, they become more and more interested. And I think this is one way of really encouraging them to be involved.
Yes, that's my same view, because I think that clinical work gives you questions, and with research you can answer the question and get even more involved and improve clinical wise and research wise. But again, coming back from clinical and research work, do you think that all clinicians should have, let's say, a PhD title, or let's say a high academic title to do research, or do you think research is accessible for everyone? Just maybe it may take slightly longer to get familiar with it.
I don't think it is necessary to have a higher degree in order to do research. Of course, it is nice to have a certificate to state that you have done a higher degree as the end result of a lot of hard work. And if I speak from my colleagues' perspective, they are perfectly happy to be involved in clinical research without getting a higher degree. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, my next question comes, you said that your career in the UK, if I'm not wrong, started in 2005, and you started with your training there, and then everything came from there. So it has been 17 years, if I'm good at maths, and you've got to the top of the academic ranking. Actually, you've reached huge milestones. If someone wanted to become, let's say, Liona, 17 years on, what would you suggest to him or her?
I would say that if someone is very keen to do research, and there's a need to be open-minded and be, well, a simple way of saying is to be a blank piece of paper. Be open-minded, be a sponge, be inquisitive, be always ready to absorb and learn as much as you can from everyone around you. And I always say that everything should have been done yesterday, because we have to be ahead of the game, and being the first is extremely important. And if you really want to start somewhere, then I think certainly you need to find yourself a teacher, a mentor. Having the right person to guide you through is extremely important. And I was very lucky that I had Kypros. I have Kypros, and he's truly inspirational.
Yes, actually, I have to say that to have some, let's say, father or mother in research is absolutely very important. But of course, you have to be motivated. So, of course, you may be surrounded by huge people, but you need to have a big motivation to do research, because it's time consuming. So, I mean, it means glory, but also lots of sacrifice. So how would you motivate someone who may be, let's say, keen on having some glory, but is a little bit scared of big sacrifices?
Oh, I think that is a very difficult question, and if we focus on the sacrifices, then nobody will want to get involved, right? And I certainly would want to focus on the positives. And as mentioned before, integrating clinical research within our daily clinical work really helps, because, to my colleagues, they don't feel burdened. They feel like, they're doing clinical work, and at the same time, they're collecting essential research data. And over time, they don't find it as a burden. And the next thing is, I need to show them how powerful data is. I think, yes, doing research could be quite mundane, quite tedious, repeatedly. You need to do the same stuff on many patients in order to collect a lot of data. But at the end of this process, you have a good set of data, and then and I think it's amazing when you get results that make sense. And even with negative results, I remind my colleagues that these negative results can generate more research questions that can guide further research. Essentially, without data, we cannot find answers to our questions. So yes, it's hard work. It could be very repetitive and boring as to that extent. But I think at the end of that process, when you have nice data, even if you have negative results, the scientific integrity is there. Whatever you demonstrate would be meaningful. And I would say that what I have learned is that junior doctors are most scared of not having research ideas. I don't know why they are so worried about it, but they are. And the moment I ask them if they're interested to do research, the first thing they say is, "Oh, I don't have any ideas." So it is important to tell them to keep their eyes and ears open, encourage them to get involved, however small his or her part is. And another thing is show them how paper writing isn't that scary by giving them simple guidance. So I give them very simple instructions, and then they suddenly say, "Oh, it's not that difficult then." I said, "Yes, it's not that difficult," and therefore they can overcome their fear quite easily.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. Well, I believe that, and from my point of view, if I can add something, maybe, of course, when you do research, if you have no question, maybe let's start with one question which you want to test. Maybe when you've tested this one, no matter whether positive or negative result, you can have another one, and from things come another thing. So from one thing comes another one. So yes, I absolutely support your view as well. But coming to my next question, I mean, you must be a very busy person, of course. I'm sure, well, I mean, it is difficult to imagine, I find it difficult for me, let alone for you, to imagine your life without research activity. But do you think this has changed dramatically your daily life? It has impacted positively or negatively? And can you imagine how would it be your life without that?
I would say that research is my hobby. And therefore, yep, every day would involve, some clinical work, some research, and, I work till perhaps 11 p.m. every day. It's not that late. I used to work till much later, but I'm getting old and therefore I do need my sleep. And sleeping is important for healing and therefore is essential to sleep. And so I think, it's busy. My clinical work is heavy. I start in the morning, ward round, clinics, labor ward duties, fetal intervention, and luckily I have some of my clinics being converted into research clinics, such as my fetal brain clinic and preeclampsia high-risk clinic. So I see them for both research and clinical purposes, so they become a bit more meaningful for me. And well, when I'm not doing clinical stuff, then I could be having meetings with my research team members, clinical colleagues, international collaborators. So it's somewhat never ending. And but I do enjoy doing what I do, as long as I don't have deadlines. I mean, deadlines can be quite challenging, and many people ask me how I manage to get through all my deadlines. And I think well, time management is important, and assigning time each day for a certain task is important, and within that period of time I must finish my task, and that really helps me get through my deadlines.
Now I have another nice question for you. Just say, in the event someone was keen on becoming your fellow, what sort of person would you be interested in terms of skills, commitment? What would you be looking into a person who wants to become Liona Poon's fellow?
I'm looking for someone who's motivated and inquisitive. I think without these two qualities, it's difficult, for him or her to do research. And, I've taken on a midwife to be my PhD student, and she was over the moon when I proposed to her to become my PhD student, because she's a bit like me, very OCD, obsessed with details, very inquisitive, and I invited her to be my PhD student. And I'm delighted she accepted my invitation. So it doesn't take a lot. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, being a blank piece of paper is helpful, because I need my fellow to be open-minded, ready to absorb and learn as much as possible. Over time, they will be able to be an independent researcher and develop their own ideas and conduct their own research.
Of course, if they have no idea, you can support them, and then their ideas can start from yours, and then maybe they can start building up, having their own ideas. So another question for me would be that you discussed you talked about your relationship, professional relationship with your boss, with your former boss, Professor Nicolaides. And you talked about the importance of having colleagues in terms of maybe not only local, but also foreign colleagues, let's say in terms of networking. What is your attitude towards not only local team, but also, let's say, foreign team or team from other hospitals in terms of networking? How important do you think it is for an individual researcher?
I think having the ability to collaborate with many researchers across the world is amazing because you can share ideas, you can do research together. And to be honest, I've said it before, I feel a bit alone, or I feel a bit lonely in Asia. It's not that people don't do research in Asia, but they do. But certainly, I feel isolated in some way. So I think, you know, with the ability to connect with many researchers across the world, I think is an amazing situation, and certainly support that. I think one thing I would say is, when I'm involved in a collaborative research, I want to be involved from the beginning, not to be brought in halfway through so that I can give my opinion. No, I think the idea is that we should build a project together if we are to work collaboratively together. Yes,
this is a very important point, because if someone wants to do a, let's say, a multi-center collaborative study, it has to be collaborative from scratch, not from the unfolding the study. So, okay, I'd like to thank you very much for sharing this piece of personal life in this professional interview. So thank you very much, Liona, for your interview.
Thank you so much, Andrea.